This session, I think, is particularly interesting, factoring in the human factor. It's a riddle, and there will be a test at the end of this. So if you want to leave now, you may, but otherwise you'll be quizzed. Thank you again for coming. On the panel today with me, we have Philippa Haley, Senior Vice President at PIMCO, and she will shed some interesting facts from research about human behavior and decision making. I think we can all learn more about ourselves. We also have Brad Shepard, partner and financial advisor at Cadence Financial Management, to my extreme left. He's a well-respected practitioner in the retirement industry, and he will share with us knowing all this human frailty and how he can successfully or has successfully overcome them. And I think we can learn a great deal from him as well. So I'm going to get a little wonky first. For those who like wonkiness, you will appreciate the first part, which is my little part. And then we're going to get into more colloquial, more dialogue discussion. And so bear with me for a moment and we'll get started now. So we define life by our experiences. And wealth often makes our desired experiences possible. Although wealth is not the destination, it is the enabler to experiencing life the way we seek. So when delivering financial and investment advice and portfolio management services, folks like myself, to individuals, families, and institutions, it is important to know that the ultimate objective is not the creation and the preservation of capital, but using wealth as a transmission mechanism to realize and sustain a set of desired outcome for oneself, one's heirs, or stakeholders. In the retirement advice industry, we should be aware that we're helping clients to achieve the experience and outcome they seek by being thoughtful in designing a path to desired outcome. As such, the means to the end is as important as the end. The process we encourage workers to save and invest during the working years and managing downside risks to failing to meet or sustain lifetime income should ideally be consistent with and tailored to each worker's circumstances. So we should be mindful of two factors when we deliver advice or when designing advice tools to help plan participants. The first is what economists refer to as the utility function. This is the wonky part now. A utility function from a pure theoretical standpoint assumes a rational economic actor. We're supposed to all be rational when we go out and act economically. And would use rational calculations to make financial decisions efficiently and to achieve outcomes that are aligned with objectives in our best economic interest. We all know that in practice this is not the case. We have done some crazy things in our lives, buying wrong things, shouldn't take those decisions, and we regretted it and so on and so forth because it was somewhat irrational, seems like. We all know that in practice this is not the case, so there are non-economic considerations that cannot be solved through optimal utility function calculations. So for example, a retiring couple with limited resources making a decision to relocate after significant searches decided to end up at a more expensive and congested suburban location in the Northeast rather than in a lower tax, lower cost retirement community in the Southeast that will meet all their objectives rationally. Their economically irrational decision is because the couple wanted to be close to their grandchildren and their church. We desired the experience is not always deduced to financial efficiency or act rationally to achieve the optimum economic outcome. So that's one. Two is what behavioral economics refer to as cognitive biases. We all know that. We do not always make decisions in our best interest. In Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman's best-selling behavioral economics book, Thinking Fast and Slow, if you haven't read it, I encourage you to grab a copy. He pointed out that our brains, thus ourselves, operate between system 1 and system 2 thinking. System 1 is sort of the fast thinking, representing our fight or flight responses from our reflexive, primal, or old brain. System 2 is slow thinking emanating from our analytical and rational frontal cortex, or new brain. It is the initiative and the impulsive brain that keeps us alive all these millions of years, but it is the deliberative and judicious brain that makes a civilized, wise, and logical human possible. So, however, our default mode is always still type 1. When it comes to putting money away today and investing long-term for our future self, from what we want to do now, the present self. Most of us need type 2 thinking help. And he does type 2 thinking help. The challenge is that even if we know, we still fall prey to the cognitive biases. So overconfidence bias, self-serving bias, herd mentality, loss aversion, framing cognitive biases, narrative fallacy. Philippa is going to go into all that. And anchoring biases, confirmation biases, hindsight biases are just some of the hundreds of biases that we know, known biases today that propel investors and savers to make bad and irrational decisions. We need record keepers to maintain tools and design systems and advisors to communicate and educate participants to overcome biases against their long-term best interests. With that, I think I've set both of you up nicely to do the things that you do. So Philippa, if you may get started.
Thank you very much. That is a great setup. So hi everyone, very happy to be here today. So I'm going to start just by going through a research study that was recently conducted by PIMCO and then looking at some of the behavioral insights that we have from that study as well and what really behavioral science means when we look at various biases that have come up through that study. So as Philip mentioned, I work at PIMCO. We are very research focused in our nature, and when I relocated here from our Australian business about 2 years ago, we kicked off a study looking at what the drivers of performance and expectations are of investors on our industry and really how investors' investment philosophies have changed and looking overall at really trends, what trends and opportunities are out there that investors are really showing us. And one that stood out to us was knowing that over 51% of wealth in the US is managed by women, and that's really quite a key statistic for us to look at and say, well, what is the driver of what women are looking for from our industry and overall what are investors looking for? So I'll go into some of those findings, really looking overall at investors, not specifically at women, but just what respondents really said to us within that study. So really what came to us as a key finding and what we published our study as is called Women Investing in the Pursuit of a Wealth-Life Balance. And this wealth-life balance was a term that we coined looking at the fact that respondents overall told us that they were really time poor, really in fact more time poor than money poor, and see the value of our industry as a result of that, but really feel that there is a disconnect from what the expectations are or what life is demanding of them versus what our industry is actually setting up for. And so there are ultimately a number of disconnects with that, and outside of the time poor element, there's where people are really setting their financial goals and their personal goals and personal priorities. And that really to us pointed out a number of opportunities for where we could really be realigning to where our industry is really traditionally set up as a framework that revolves around retirement and retirement goals. People aren't necessarily looking for just that retirement conversation when they're setting up for planning or setting their own goals. And those goals are really much more short-term and long-term, and people are looking to strike that balance between how do I achieve what I need to achieve now in the short term, and I know that I need to have these long-term goals, but I'm not necessarily prioritizing those. And one really interesting statistic that came out was when we asked respondents to tell us what is, if you look at your household as a role of various C-suite roles, if you're a CEO, a CFO, a COO, and what we called a CCT, which is a chief caretaker. And we said to respondents, which ones do you identify with most? And of the female respondents, females said across that, actually, you know what, I identify with every single role in the household. I take a really broad view of my household and how I approach what I'm planning for, and that shows this shorter and long-term theme coming through. Male respondents, on the other hand, overall really identified with being more of the CEO or the CFO of their household. So that was a really true distinction for us in planning conversations. And another thing that came through that we were chatting about earlier is when it comes to financial goals, and looking at that as part of the role in a household, but then also just what are your financial priorities, and how do you prioritize various goals, we asked respondents. And the strongest statistic that came out there was that 17% and 18%, 17% of women and 18% of men ranked retirement as their top financial goal, which is concerningly low. And I know when we were chatting about it before, Brent, you were saying that was, you found that to be similar in some conversations you're having.
Yeah, and I'll get into a couple of the slides on some surveys that we did with our plan sponsor clients, but retirement, they may be set up appropriately for retirement through older features, or maybe they are doing 10% into the retirement plan, but that is not what's on their mind. What's on their mind is balancing their household budget, paying down debt, saving for their kids' college education. So I think we may be doing a good job as an industry on the retirement side, and we've gotten better throughout the years, but how do we address the concerns that people are thinking about when they're driving to work in their car? It's not necessarily that that long-term thinking about, am I saving enough for retirement? It's more on the short term, within, a year, 2 years, 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. And in line with that as well, with that short-termism, I think was something that came up in a session before as well. When we asked people, what are your actual priorities at the moment? What do you prioritize in life? The top personal priority or personal goal was actually improving health and wellness. Following that came travel or living abroad. That's actually what I'm prioritizing, and this was across males and female respondents. And then financial stability as the third top priority. So very much resonating with that kind of shorter term, and then some longer term in there in that discussion. So interesting for us, and I think the last statistic I'll go to in that study, just to set up what that means from a biasy perspective, is really that definition of performance. When looking at our industry, what are investors defining as performance? What is the top thing that you look for from our industry? And a steady income was the top driver of performance for people, and that was across that shorter and long term, which was not what we expected. Well, I guess we didn't go out expecting anything in particular, but just interesting to see that role of income is seen as being something that can play a role today and tomorrow, as opposed to how we may traditionally speak in our industry. And then having the agility to meet unexpected needs is the second driver of performance, and followed by making progress towards these lifestyle goals. So lifestyle goals, along with this health and wellness, are a priority and a theme that we're seeing not only in our industry, but many other industries. If anyone follows the activewear industry or any health and fitness related industries, will see that out there. So what does all this mean when it comes to actually looking at our industry and how we address these themes? And we look at behavioural science, and that's something that at PIMCO is increasingly important for us. How do we actually frame ourselves off the back of these insights and what we know investors are telling us? How do we frame our offering? And how do we look at the mindset of investors and their desired approach for what we should be taking to engage with investors and what they're actually interested in, if it isn't directly a retirement conversation? We see education as playing a key role in that. One of the handouts you'll see that you were given as you came in was this book called, a series of booklets called The What, Why and How. And that was a start for us as our education and addressing one of the findings we had around removing the jargon. A lot of respondents said, you know what, I actually find the industry to be intentionally complex and confusing, and it would be great if you could just use less jargon. And this was something we developed to start addressing just some of the really common questions that we find in the industry that people want to be asking. So that comes to something that when we start to talk about behavioural science, we look at it as saying framing. How do we actually frame what we're talking about, or reframe that to help achieve investors' goals and get into a similar mindset to what people are looking at?
Philippa,
Yes.
may I chime in? Just
Go for it.
It seems like we have a lot of challenges throughout our financial life, of course, as stating the obvious. But how do we take what you have learned and to help inform folks like me and Brent here to think about the present self, the present need, balancing the future need, and curtail that automatic biases to the present, and really sort of go to the future me and think about it? How do you think one can do that and do it effectively from a practice standpoint. Any thought on that? I know it's a tough question. I don't think there's an obvious answer, but what are some of the things that you may think that, and I'd love to hear your thought as well.
Yeah, I can give you an initial thought, and obviously this is not an expert view on this, just from the exposure that we've been having at PIMCO around behavioural science and some of the reading that I'll start to talk to. But future self is actually a concept that has been researched by some behavioural scientists and some at Chicago Booth, where we are partnered. And one of the faculty members there, Oleg Aminsky, did some research on the future self and how connected you are or aren't, and how essentially you can frame a situation or a conversation to be more or less connected to your future self and the decision that you're making. So the research study that they did really looked at it as a lot of faculty do studies on university graduates, because that's where their labs are. So the study was done on that, and looking as students were graduating, one group were given one list of reading or something to read that basically said, you're graduating from school, you know everything that you've got ahead of you, you're so certain about everything, you've studied so hard, you know exactly where you're going. Let me ask you a question. If we were to give you $100 today or $150 in a year, which one would you take? So that group were set up to be very connected with their future self. They know where they're going, they know where they're headed, so you can probably guess maybe which sum of money they took. The other group were given another manipulation, as they call it, saying you're about to graduate, there's so much change ahead of you, you have no idea where you're going, there's so much uncertainty. Hey, we might give you $100 today, or you could take $150 in the future, maybe in a year. So the point of that is, if the way something is framed to be connected to that future decision, you're more likely to make a decision that connects with that outcome. So you'll choose $150 in a year, because what am I going to do with $100 today versus getting more in a year's time? If you're uncertain or cannot connect with that future self, you're likely to take that sum of money today and think, I'll take it today, I'm really more interested in what I can achieve now. So it's more of an academic answer, but that's where we...
I don't think there's human behavior is one of the most fascinating things in my life. I gravitate towards that sort of naturally, because in order to understand, forget about others, understand oneself, I think that we have to be more reflective about why we make decisions the way we make, and try to overcome our own biases. What about on the practice side? How have you thought about how you may want to frame that, or do you? I mean, I know we talk to folks, participants, say, let's worry about the future, and are you going to have enough to retire and all that. It's kind of, horrible. But it's so important, and it's so important what you do, and folks like you, what you do with participants, educating them, what record keepers do in a digital advice space is doing the same thing. Can you talk a little bit about perhaps how you may want to frame that, and how you have had maybe success in thinking about the future for them?
Well, I think it's difficult just in this industry because everybody's future self is totally different. So the picture of somebody sitting on the beach doesn't resonate with somebody and may resonate with somebody else. Even when we put surveys together to help our clients survey their employees in terms of things that they want to learn about from a financial wellness standpoint, or what new benefits they would like, whether it's student repayment programs, financial wellness, fintech. We even struggle with what photograph do we put in the background of that survey, and the current one that we have is an ocean with binoculars looking out. Well, I'm sure that half the people are looking at that and going, oh, that's another retirement plan picture of somebody on a beach somewhere. So I think it's difficult for us to cast a broad net on what everybody's future retirement looks like. And a lot of, we're seeing, especially with the younger, millennial generation, that it will soon be 75% of the workforce. Retirement, it's not about retiring, especially now that they see that you can work remotely, you can do consulting. It's financial independence at some point. So it's even just changing what we're used to saying as retirement and changing it to financial independence. But we do a lot of one-on-one services for our organizations, and I will talk a little bit about financial planning. But a lot of times we'll get a response of, when we ask somebody, well, what do you want your financial independence to look like in the future? You get I don't know. When you really ask them to visualize and think about it, and maybe sit down with their spouse and come back with some goal setting and some things that they want to see, everybody comes back with a vision of what they want their future to look like. And it's different for everybody, whether it's a vacation home somewhere, or retiring early, or consulting part-time, or just visiting or babysitting 5 days a week for their grandkids. Everybody has a different idea of what they want for their own retirement. So I think the difficult thing for us as an industry is on a personalized plan for each person is how do we deliver that and how do we help them achieve their financial independence at some point on a scalable level, which is difficult.
Thank you for that. I'll just give something for all the audience to remember. I'm in the middle of finishing a book by the name of Thinking in Bets by a lady who's wonderful. Her last name is Duke. She and her brother were both bracelet owners in poker. She almost finished her PhD in cognitive science. So one part she talks about, I don't know any of you are Seinfeld fans. Apparently there was an episode where Seinfeld doesn't want to go to bed early at night. He likes to stay up and stay up and stay up. And so the present self really want to enjoy himself, so to speak, whatever he was doing. And then in the morning, the future self get really upset because the future self is saying, well, why didn't the past self go to sleep earlier? And then come the next night, the present self again stay up and stay up and stay up. And then the future self, in the morning, say, oh my goodness, I couldn't even get up in the morning. So the idea about using that story was really powerful is if we can somehow help humans to think about the future self and the present self, to hook that with wisdom, with experience, and with maturity. I know all those are terrible words, but those are words that we need from folks here who can help in understanding that, in making it real, in personalizing it, in individualizing it. Because yes, the future self may want different things for oneself. That is not uniform. And finding digital solutions that can help us to efficiently or scale to supplement what we do for our plan participants. Maybe those are things that we can all collectively think about in our industry and how to get a better road. And I'm going to quote Mohammed El-Arian for 1 second because of PIMCO, that we want to get to the destination with the least amount of bumpiness and make sure we have a high degree of certainty that outcome is going to be realized, whatever that outcome is, and that's the future self, present self. But I'm not the speaker, so I already took too much time. Please carry on.
I think along those lines, I mean, that something like nudge, which Richard Thaler, who Nobel laureate, and there's a quote up there on the screen and also in the book of behavioral biases you all have. And Richard Thaler, for many of you may know, implemented along with others the concept of a nudge into that auto-enrollment and what has now been so successful for a large amount of the population in the United States. And that is something that we are fortunate at PIMCO. Richard Thaler is now a senior advisor to us on behavioural science and retirement, which is fantastic, and we hope to do a lot together with him and other faculty at the Centre for Decision Research on that behavioural side. But something as simple as a nudge, where it is designed for good and it is where the decision is kind of made for you until you say you don't want it to be. So you're enrolled in this unless you tell us you're not, as opposed to here you can enroll in this and it will change everything. All you have to do is click here, which sounds easy enough to just click here and enroll, but it's actually taking that step. And we were talking about this morning about college savings. I don't know if you want to tell that story.
Yeah, it's just, I think we figured it out on the retirement plan side. It's how do we make it easy and push that easy button or automatic features on everything else. And I just got an email from a record keeper last week about them creating a solution in this short-term space. And if I say any record keeper out there, it's not that I either love you or I hate you. I love you all. We have 14 different record keepers that we work with, and we work closely. We love all your nuances and all the things that we have to help our plan sponsors navigate. But this solution, I watched the video like 3 times over the weekend looking at this, and I'm going, this is really great. And one of the things that I'll touch on is just all the solutions that we're creating on the plan sponsor level is how are we actually engaging our participants to use them? Because the amount of information that is sent out about retirement, about savings, it's just too much. Just an email to a participant that sees something about saving for short-term savings, they're not going to open it up. So how do we, as an advisor, help our plan sponsors engage the participants in a way to give them the ability to go in and understand the tools and resources and everything else that that has been given to them. So if we can figure out how to do it in the retirement space and then also carry that over to college savings and everything else, I think we're working in that direction.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll touch a bit on different biases, and then I think it'd be great to go into those examples. But if we think about that in terms of how we might approach this from a human behavior perspective, what we've been learning a lot about at PIMCO, and something that we've really looked to implement into our investment process and how we understand how we make investment decisions, but also how as investors in our day-to-day, how do we all make decisions in our own lives, and the examples you were giving of System 1 and System 2 and confirmation bias and all of these really important things to learn about how we behave as humans and how we actually think we know how to make the best decisions, and in fact we really don't. And that goes down into our investment decisions and also the actual relationships that we have with our clients or our colleagues. Nick Epley is a faculty member at Chicago Booth, and he focuses a lot on the social psychology elements of behavioral science. And when I saw him present a few months ago, he gave an example of how we aren't mind readers. He's written a great book called Mindwise that focuses on that. We think we understand how others think, believe, feel, and want, when actually, in fact, we really don't. And he brings up on the screen something that's called the Chuck Norris emotion code, or Chuck Norris emotion chart. If anyone has their phones out, just Google it. And it's the same photo of Chuck Norris, and it lists about 16 different emotions. And every emotion
he has that many emotions?
No, but it's the same face, and you think that could be happy, that could be angry, that could be confused. So I think it just goes to the point of we think we actually know with the interactions we're having with people, and we don't necessarily, and even when it comes to ourselves and the own biases that we're susceptible to. So we've been exploring a lot about that at PIMCO, and there is a very abridged version of the System 1 and System 2. We've called it How We Think Affects How We Invest on PIMCO's website. If you'd like to just read a shorter version in the whole book, we have a number of pieces there that just are being helpful as a source of breaking down just some of the behavioral science concepts. I won't even read through this chart because I can't read it from here, but a lot of these biases are in this book, the little book of behavioral biases that you've got there, and that's really a way that we see that connection point of here are biases that we can be aware of as investors, and for our clients, and how they can actually affect us as investors in our decision making and planning. So I'll probably hand over. I think it's great now to actually go through some examples that you have.
Thank you. Again, my name is Brent Shepard. My firm is Cadence Financial Management. We're a boutique retirement consulting firm right outside Philadelphia. We also have a financial planning and wealth management side as well of our business. So these are just a couple slides that we've been sharing over the past year, and we'll continue to share over the next year with our plan sponsor clients. But just a quote up at the top from Shlomo Benartzi about just the digital revolution in the retirement plan space. He coined the phrase 6 months or a year or so ago of digital fiduciary. We are not going into our plan sponsors and saying, yet here's another fiduciary concern that you have to worry about. Really what we're trying to do is take a digital approach to our plan sponsor clients, regardless of what record-keeping platform they're on. And number one is just hitting home on auto features and the success of them, particularly with new clients. But there's been a number of other clients that have taken 3 or 4 committee meetings until we actually get traction with the buy-in of implementing auto features. And then, not to stop there, continue to talk about how did they perform, and how can we scale them up a little bit better. So you start out with the peanut butter and jelly of the auto enrollment first, and then the jelly of the auto escalate. They work very well together, but a lot of plan sponsors, they just want to start out with one first and then see how that works and then add something else later. The big thing, particularly with new clients that we brought on, is data integrity. So the lifetime income scores and everything that you as record keepers are doing to help participants understand where they're at from a check and balance standpoint for retirement are amazing. To just look at compensation data, look at deferral rates, look at age, and see how that person stacks up against maybe their peer group. But what we're finding is a lot of that data is inaccurate in the record-keeping system. So a client that we brought on that had paper enrollment 15 years ago or 10 years ago that moved into online enrollment. Well, we were looking at the numbers and it just didn't look right in terms of the amount of average contributions for participants, how many people were enrolled, and what we realized that there was a whole tranche of employees that had never had their deferral rates uploaded into the system. So we went through a process of getting all that data in there. So when we come back and report on a plan level, we know that everything's accurate, and that's when we can start tweaking things and adding automatic enrollment features and seeing how the buy-in of the employees actually work, because we have the data and we know it's accurate on the record keeping side. And then what we're trying to do is take the financial wellness term and actually deliver it to our clients. So using the data above and making sure that all of that is accurate is how do we then utilize the digital features that all these record keeping systems have to deliver a financial wellness approach to our clients. So this looks better on a wide screen, so things got a little jumbled up here. But we took a look at our plan sponsor employees. So we sent out an anonymous survey, and we wanted to see, instead of how they feel about their retirement, really how they felt about their overall financial plan. And the top two things that people responded about just keeping them from building their own financial plan is that 42% lacked knowledge, and the other 33%, they just didn't know where to begin. They didn't know who to turn to. And I think that we may have the retirement side figured out, but where do people go and who do they have to talk to about their needs outside of maybe just retirement planning? We were shocked by a lot of the feedback that we received from employees. 91% would attend a financial wellness workshop. 91%. Now, some responded and said they would prefer virtual over in-person. Some would rather have group one-on-one versus a group. So the idea of when we're delivering the financial wellness to clients is we need to do an omni-channel approach, because we want to try to engage as many participants as possible. So we will do virtual meetings. We will have pre-recorded content from record keepers. We will have one-on-one individualized employee meetings that they can come in for a 20-minute session and talk to a financial planner. A lot of people, so I believe it's 88%, are interested in a personalized financial plan, and 87% would be interested in outreach by a financial planner. And I think that is what we really need to figure out, because I myself, we have a 10-month-old at home, and as a financial advisor, I set up a custodial account for him when he was born in January, and I haven't put $1 into it yet. And every time I get in the car and I'm driving to and from work, I'm like, we need to take some money and put it into that account so it will grow for his college. I'm busy and I'm time strapped, and like we all are in this room, even your own financial plans, would it be helpful to have somebody using an outreach type of program to figure out what is on the minds of individuals, and then how can you help them? So can you check in with them in 6 months? They told you they wanted to do this. Can you check in with them in 6 months and say, hey, did you do the thing that you wanted to do? If they didn't, you then, it's the slap on the wrist, and you say, okay, we're going to check in another 6 months to see if you accomplished that. This was pretty astounding to us as well. 49% believe their employer has a responsibility to help them with their personal financial plan. This is not from, a match or, additional savings or benefits. This is, I need resources and support. I don't know who to turn to. So can you provide me with somebody to talk to about my own financial plan? And 80% said they would stay with their employer longer if these resources were offered to them and it actually helped them reduce their financial stress. So when we're working with an employer and delivering these, the first thing, and we may only work with a plan sponsor on this first level, maybe over the course of the year, but the idea is to deliver all of these in a top-down approach over the course of several years. So the first, just working closely with all of our record-keeping partners, understanding all the tools and financial wellness offerings you're having. Everybody now is bolting on a financial wellness type of platform. So how do we take that and deliver that to the employees? So educating them on where to go on the website to click on that to enter in the data so that they can see if they're on track for retirement. The next is survey the employees, see what they want to learn about, just as we did with the employees in the prior slide. Figure out what financial wellness workshops they want to have, if you have a younger workforce and maybe student debt is a problem, you'll get feedback that way. And then implementing the actual financial wellness seminars. So we use omni-channel approach where we're going to be on site, where we're going to do virtual meetings, and then we also deliver those in a one-on-one session. So you can engage with different people how they want to be engaged with. And then if it's appropriate and we don't have enough of buy-in already, it's then doing an RFP for any fintech tools. So whether it's student debt repayment programs or another financial wellness program, outside of this, or a college saving program that can be sponsored by the employer, looking at all of those to enhance the benefits package. And then lastly is introducing individual financial planning services. So the way our firm was kind of founded and segmented in the past was we had our individual clients that we handled wealth and financial planning for, and then we had our plan sponsor clients that we did consulting for. We never commingled the two. If we had an employee that asked us, hey, what else do you do? We would have a conversation. But we never felt that it was responsible for us to go into an employer and say, oh, we also do all these other services, you can buy into it. It felt to us as if we were selling some other service. But throughout the years, particularly over the last 2, we have had an astounding number of employees through these financial workshops come up to us and say, I need help. So we're now working with employers to figure out how they can either do a discount program, a reimbursement program, or just pay for individual financial plans for their employees, because you can see the overwhelming response of people want help. They're not getting it all through the 401k platform. How can we at least get a customized financial plan that says, here are the action items you need to accomplish based on what you told us, and we're going to check back in with you in 6 months and then maybe in 12 months and then see how you're doing on those items. I think that's what we need as individuals and as employees, is somebody pushing you to get the things done. Auto features work great on the 401k or on the retirement savings 401k side, but everything else in our lives, whether it's college savings, how can we help employees make the right decisions on that end?
Great. We have another 5-10 minutes left. I'm going to hog the first question, if you permit me. And please think about what questions you may have. I was a bit disappointed. The first session we had was only like 2 questions. And then, of course, when I was done, everybody ran up to talk to Dick. I felt really left out. So I appreciate if there's more questions while I'm sitting here. So I think there is a seemingly a conundrum. Sounds like Greenspan talking. There's a seeming conundrum that, on the one hand, the industry has totally embraced all auto everything, right? Default, blah, 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 because we don't act in our best interests. Let's make sure that we force them to save. Let's make sure we will save it for them. Let's make sure that we auto-escalate them. Let's make sure that we know what portfolio to put them into. And so that, because then they don't have those biases of selling low and buying high, I think, right? Or to make mistakes by not saving. So the conundrum is, well, on the other hand, there seems to be, there's this need, the crying out of being engaged. So in the old days, we said, well, don't get them engaged because they're going to make all kinds of mistakes or they're not engaged. And in fact, education has not worked, right? I mean, we can educate them, we can teach them how to fish. After 10, 20 years of teaching them how to fish, they're still hungry. They still come up to us and say, well, I don't know how to fish. So we said, well, forget about teaching you how to fish. We'll just go ahead and fish for you and feed you. But yet, I think now with the financial wellness and all this we're talking about, is it fair to say that we have a segmented population? Is it fair to say that, or maybe it's fair to say, trust has broken down in our society, that we question everything, and that perhaps we are now looking to our employer, seemingly trustworthy, as a source to provide us those kind of solutions that in the past maybe we have found elsewhere. Quick dialogue, any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on that, maybe?
So I was just, I love white papers, so if anybody wants to get my contact information and send me white papers from your firm, I will happily read them. I think PwC just came out with their 2019 Employee Financial Wellness Survey, but I think it polled participants on where they get their financial advisor connection. And the number one was a referral from a family or friend, and the second was from their employer. So whether or not that's a plan advisor that also works with individuals, or there is other people in the workforce that are referring a financial advisor throughout the ranks, again, I mean, it's coming from the employer.
Yeah, interesting. Philippa, any thought on that?
I think just in kind of another level of depth to it, more in that your point on education, we educate people, and I think there's the angle of education that we're giving, and I've learned a lot, particularly on the behavioural side of we educate on what is theoretic, what is textbook, like what's a textbook investor, what's a textbook market environment, and I think we need to look at how we're actually educating for the real human way, the way that humans will interact with things, and be aware of the fact that we don't all function rationally, therefore don't educate on like when markets go down, you should do this, when markets go up, you should do that. So I think it's how do we actually position all of this, and where that comes from is
Should we go back to the old saying that you can be taught nothing but learn everything? Okay, so with that said, I know you are like dying to raise your hands, so I'm just going to suppress you all to raise too many hands, but at least some hands. Is there any questions for these wonderful panelists today with us? Oh, thank you. If I may then, are there generational biases that we should segment our response to overcome those biases? Go with you first.
Yeah, looking at the data that we have, I think one that stands out is really the ambition to increase wealth, so increasing personal wealth. So I think one of the data points we had was around how much people anticipate to increase their personal wealth, so not their income, but their savings over the next, I think, 5 years. And the millennials and Gen X together were by far much more aggressive. I think they said that they anticipated to increase their wealth by 40% or more over the next 5 years. So maybe confirmation or being overconfidence with that is something to possibly address, but I also think that different generations are taking different approaches in how they're looking at that saving. But that's one that off the top of my head I think really stands out as that generational difference. I think the other, that's probably the main one I mentioned. Any
practical things that do you talk to? I know women in investing is becoming bigger and bigger an issue as more and more women are in the workforce meaningfully for finally and having this pay gap slowly removed. Women are playing an important role, and I think that this is a male-dominated industry still, although I'm delighted to see many women here. That perhaps tools and perhaps the way that we communicate is still from a very much a male framework. Any thought on that? Do you see women having different, maybe have different biases or have a different set of opportunity that we should talk to them differently? I think you're kind of alluding to that a little bit in your presentation, but any thought on that?
And we see a lot of what PIMCO's, that white paper, Women in Investing, we see a lot more where we'll work with women on just in a one-on-one session or a financial plan, and their top priorities are a little bit more short-term focus than on the male side we see, and I think it was a one tick up on 17 versus 18, but retirement is still something that they're very concerned about, bigger picture, longer term. But again, we have engagement from women as equal as males in terms of wanting to get a handle on their overall financial situation. And I think from just whether it's millennial or Gen X or the baby boomer generation, I think that the thing that limits all of us from making decisions about getting started on the financial plan is all the same. It's the loss aversion or myopia or inertia to get just started on the process. And again, a lot of people just don't know where to turn. So we need to help solve that for individuals.
Any other? Yes, sir.
So the way that we posed the question when we reached out to the employees of our plan sponsor clients is resources and support. Resources meaning a contact of somebody to call and talk to about their financial plan. Support saying, I need some financial help as well. And the bulk of it came back. The other 50% of that was employees saying, no, it's up to me. But we were overwhelmed by like the amount of people that 49% is a pretty big number. Half the workforce feels that their employers should have given them some access to somebody to talk to, and it was actually even split between ones that thought it was just resources and ones that would actually like support. But we've had a lot of employers look at doing kind of a reimbursement program. So hey, if an employee wants to get a financial plan done, or we worked with another company that said financial plan and or legal fees. So maybe you give them a $2,000 reimbursement program that you can use one time, or you can use it ongoing depending on how the company wants to set it up. And that way an employee will have the ability to engage in a financial plan with their own financial planner, or us, because we're listed as a resource. And then they just submit that financial planning invoice, or if they just want to get legal work done, submit that invoice back for a reimbursement program. So that's an easy way to do it where, and then again, you can pick a select group of employees. Maybe that's upper management, senior vice president, so it's not all of the workforce, but what we're trying to do is work with plan sponsors to create a way to give at least some sort of financial plan to everybody, because the reality is the people that need the help most are probably in the millennial and Gen X, where they're debt strapped. They have a lot of stuff on their mind. They have kids that they're planning for, and they're the ones who really need a lot of help. And I'm seeing a lot on the retirement advisory side build out wealth management arms. Those are great for the C-suite that's rolling their assets over and they need help. But how are we able to provide financial planning services to the people that need it most? And I think that's through a fee-based financial plan for individuals, and we just need to figure out how that all works out.
Mike, please. So the question is millennial, the oldest millennial is in the early 40s now, and that surveys have suggested that they don't really trust the market. I would go back to this word trust is so critically important. Forget the word fiduciary, really trust. And they think that some is rigged, fake news, whatever, deep fake, all the wonderful things that we have today, and that they are afraid that another 2007, 2008 is around the corner. How do we, as advisors or behavioral scientists, think about changing that reality to be more long-term? Again, the future self vis-a-vis the present self, because we're always climbing a wall of worries, right? I mean, that's what we do. And to perhaps help them to overcome these biases. Any thoughts, Philippa? I know I give you all the easy questions.
Yeah, thank you. So there's a couple of things. I don't want to kind of go down a rabbit hole with another research study, but I feel like, and I know I've said framing a couple of times today, but I think it's that role of trust and how we're actually framing the role of the industry. Like, what is it that this generation is looking for in terms of what we talk about, we offer as an industry versus what they're actually looking for from us, or what that need is that we can better position for them is probably a clearer way. I think if you look at generational studies, there are different traits or different characteristics or roles that generations are looking for industries to fulfill that aren't necessarily what they've traditionally been. So I think we just need to look at how we actually position what our offering is. That's a very vague response, but I'm trying to bring together a few different studies that I've read without going down those wormholes. But
I think firms like TIAA, ICMA, Fidelity are trying really hard to use their own, I want to use the army of advisors to really have the touch points, to have the privilege of having somebody like him to be with each person, to talk to them and ease them through that present self to the future self. That is a privilege. That is not somebody every record keeper can afford to do. But we recommend that if you can't afford to do, then we need outsider to help to correct the wrong. Perhaps it's an answer. We're running out of time, so I want to thank you for giving us the questions, and thank you for being here, and enjoy the rest of the sessions today and tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.